Greetings my cousins. I found some recipes for using peanut butter, and I love peanut butter. And one that I found, and I must admit I haven't done many cupcake gemmers for a while, but was on her site. And this is for some peanut butter chocolate crispy chewy bars. There's a mouthful for you. So it's going to have like a Rice Krispie, as we call them in England, base. If you actually check out Cupcake Gemma's recipe, she actually replaces some of them with puffed quinoa. Always want to say, oh, I can't remember now. I don't want to. Can't think out what I used to say. Quinoa. I used to call that quinoa. But she did say, unless you find it in a health food shop, you probably won't find it. And the wife went, yeah. And so we're just making it Rice Krispies. But the one thing she uses is burnt butter. Cupcake Gemma, that is not the one. So we're going to burn some butter. Now, we need 60 grams of burnt butter. So we start with 75. And we just put that in a pan. And we just basically melt it. And then keep it keen, little stir now and again, and you will get burnt black bits in it. That's what we want. Okay, so we're just going to do that until it turns, the liquid turns a nice golden brown with plenty of black bits in it, and then we'll be ready to start adding all the other stuff to it. A few things we can do while we're preparing our burnt butter is to get measuring out our quantity. So these Rice Krispies got 135 grams there, and here I've got 45 grams of chopped ordinary salted peanuts. Gemma just says use salty ones off shelf. You can use unsalted if you wanted, but the salt will add a little bit to it. And we're just going to chuck those in there, and we'll be giving that all a mix together. Now, the other things you're going to want is 8-inch, this is actually 9-inch, square tin, which I've lined with parchment paper or baking paper. Okay. And then you're going to want, obviously, your peanut butter. Now, she says use smooth, but the crunchy one I bought, the cheap crunchy one I bought, I wouldn't say it's particularly crunchy. I don't remember it being this, like, not crunchy, as it were, in the olden days. So I've used some crunchy. You can use smooth if you wish. I've got 165 grams of that. I've got some soft brown sugar. I've got 165 grams of that. And then I've got some golden syrup, 225 grams of that. Okay, and other than a pinch of salt, that's all we're going to use for the base. Now we are going to be making like a chocolatey topping, but we can't do that until the base is fully set, and that's going to be a couple of hours probably. So at this stage all we're doing is making the base. So the butter's now melted, it's coming up to sort of like a boil, so we're just going to give it an occasional stir, keep an eye on it, might turn that heat down a fraction because that's only a small little pan, until it's burnt. Now it gets quite tricky because to begin with it will get a golden brown, but then you get this foam on the top, and it made it very difficult to actually see what was going on underneath. And then suddenly you start getting your burnt bits. So we've removed it from the heat, and then what we're going to do is add into it that golden syrup. And the sugar and the peanut butter, and we're going to mix it all together to make sure it's all nicely mixed together. We also want to just make sure our Rice Krispies and nut mixture is sort of roughly combined, but we are going to be obviously mixing it when we put this into it. Now, you might have wanted, in hindsight, have used a slightly bigger pan. we now just stir that together, and then I'm going to return it to the heat, and sort of a low to medium heat, and we're going to heat it, but we're going to monitor the temperature. So we're trying to get obviously all that syrup and sugar and that peanut butter, as it were, to melt. Right, you bugger. And when it gets to 112, we are then going to pour it over that mixture, and we want to mix quite quickly because it will start setting as such quite quickly. Okay, and when it's all fully coated, we'll then tip it into our prepared tray. So that's reached temperature. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to tip that into there, and we need to work quite quickly here. I would suggest you pretty much, Gemma says just stir occasionally so it don't burn, but it does, I wouldn't say burning, but it is starting to catch on the bottom a little bit, although some of that might be remnants of burnt butter. So you might want to, that's a big one, you might want to stir it more often. Whoop, chucking my Rice Krispies everywhere. And now we want to get this all quickly, all blended in together. I'm using a wooden spoon simply because I think the spatula would be a bit too, my ones anyway, a bit too floppy to be able to turn all that mixture in there, because it is quite stiff. Okay, and we want to try and get all of this as well coated as possible. It's literally setting as I go along, and then when I'm happy it's all fully coated, as coated as I can get it, we're then going to tip it out into that. Now bear in mind it is hot, so spread it out in the tin. Okay, it's going to form quite a thick layer. And we are going to want to obviously spread it out, even it out, but try not to pack it down too much, she says. That's Gemma, that is, not me. Because although we do want it as a base, we don't want it packed so tight that when we want to cut it, it gets quite difficult. So once we're, what am I doing that with? I think I might be using a spoon. Once we're happy that we have got it into all nooks and corners, we are then just going to set it to one side. It looks a bit like I am pushing it down, but I'm more trying to move it over. It is very thick. It is very difficult to try and spread it because, like I say, it's setting as we go. But now we're going to let it cool, and when it's cooled enough, we're then going to put it for a final cooling stage in the fridge. So our base is now set, so now I'm just going to create the topping. So for that, we're going to want a bain-marie to melt down some golden syrup. I've got 20 grams of that. I've got 75 grams of butter. And then I've got some dark chocolate chips, 175 grams of that. And we're going to melt all that together. And then when it's done, we'll pour it over this base. And then just for a final bit of decoration, I've got some Rice Krispies there. I've got some peanuts, not by the chopping nails this time. And here I've got some warm, smooth peanut butter. You'll see what we're going to do in a bit. Now, I just need a palette knife for spreading our chocolate mix when it's all melted and mixed together. And then once we've finished it and decorated it, it goes back in the oven. Goes back in the fridge to set fully before we can then cut it into squares. Okay, we're not pre-cutting it. It's going to be a bit difficult with this topping on it. So, obviously with your bain-marie, make sure your bowl doesn't touch the water. Okay, and even though I've only just turned that on, that is beginning to get warm and melt. That's all that melted together. Okay, I'm just going to make sure there's no water there, and then we're just going to pour that over the surface, and then I'll use a palette knife or whatever just to spread that out. So obviously we want it right up into all the corners. We want the whole thing covered. It is only a thin layer of chocolate. And now that's done. Final little, well, not a final, one of the final little decorative touches is I've got some warm, smooth peanut butter, and I'm going to drizzle some over the top of it, and then using a cocktail stick we're just going to swirl it about a bit, and then final little touch is to take some of the Rice Krispies and sprinkle some of them over. And then finally just take some peanuts and we'll have a few of them over it. Remember, these are going to be cut up into little bars or whatever. I think that will do. Now we just need that to fully set, go in the fridge, chill it completely, and then when it's all set we'll cut it up and we'll toast it. Let's add an hour or two in the fridge. Possibly could do it a little bit longer, but what we're going to do now is slice it up. So just going to slice it down the middle. This is what I meant about being careful about packing the bottom layer down too much. It's going to make it harder to cut through. Now, when Cupcake Gemma does this, she literally cuts it in half and then cuts it in slices. But I think these are going to be too rich, so I'm going to cut these into basically, I think, into quarters, and then we'll cut it that way. So I'll get cutting it. To be honest, I think they need to go back in the fridge, and I'll do that in a bit. This is sort of a side end bit. Can't display this one, I have to eat it. It's very crispy, it's certainly chewy. It's chocolatey. And it's peanutty. There you go. Cupcake Gemma's peanut butter chocolate crispy chewy bars.